Have you ever felt like fear is holding you back, preventing you from moving forward and fully enjoying life? That feeling of unease that invades your heart and clouds your mind is more common than you might think. But what if I told you there is a way to free yourself from that fear and find lasting deep peace? In this video, we will explore how the teachings of Jesus can help you overcome fear and live in peace by trusting in the Word of God. Get ready to embark on a transformative journey through the most powerful verses in the Bible. You will discover how to apply these truths to your everyday life and experience the freedom and serenity that only God can offer. Before we begin, I invite you to comment below. Ready to overcome fear and live in peace. By doing so, you are not only affirming your commitment to overcoming your fears, but also preparing yourself to deeply absorb the lessons we are about to explore together. Dear friend, I encourage you to stay with us until the end of this video. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel and activate notifications so YouTube will alert you every time we upload a new video. Let's begin. Number 1, John 14:27, the peace of Jesus as an antidote to fear. Let me tell you something that could change your life. Jesus in John 14 says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give it to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." Have you stopped to think about the kind of peace he is offering here? It is not a fleeting peace, nor one that depends on having everything figured out. It is a deep and powerful peace, a peace that reaches into the depths of your soul and remains, regardless of what happens externally. When Jesus says, "My peace I give to you," he is talking about something the world can never give. In the world, peace depends on things being calm, on our circumstances aligning, and on there being no problems. But let's be honest, when does that ever happen? Life is full of changes, ups and downs, and the world doesn't have a peace that withstands the storms of life. Jesus' peace is something else entirely. It is like an anchor that holds firm when the waves crash hard. His peace is like a refuge that protects us, allowing us to face life's challenges with a calm that comes from something greater, something eternal. Imagine this. You're in the middle of a storm. The wind is howling, the waves are high, and darkness seems to envelop everything. Anyone would feel fear, anxiety, and despair. But then you find an inner calm, a refuge in the midst of chaos. That is the peace Jesus offers us. It's not about ignoring the difficulties or denying what is happening. It's about knowing that even in the trials, there is a peace that no one can take away from you. That is the peace that enables you to face any situation without fear, knowing that you are not alone, that God is with you, and that He has control over everything. Where does this peace come from? It comes from a deep trust in God, His love, and His power. When we trust in Him, we stop worrying so much about what we can't control. Because what's the point of worrying about the future if God is in charge? Jesus invites us to let go of anxiety, to place our concerns in His hands. By trusting in His sovereignty, we find rest. Not because everything will turn out the way we expect, but because we know that whatever happens, we are secure in His love. When we surrender fully to this trust, we begin to experience a peace that surpasses all understanding, a peace that holds us and strengthens us. But it's not just about trusting in God's plan. Jesus Himself gives us His constant presence, His unshakable companionship. We are not alone in our struggles, in our fears, or in our daily battles. He is there with us every step of the way, like a friend who never abandons us, like a refuge to which we can always turn. His presence gives us the assurance that although circumstances may change, He remains. He is a safe refuge, a rock we can lean on when everything else is shaking. And notice how this peace of Jesus also transforms our relationships. When we live in His peace, that calm extends to those around us. We become agents of peace, people who no longer respond with anger or resentment, but with understanding, empathy, and love. Forgiveness becomes easier. Reconciliation becomes easier. Finding solutions becomes easier when we are at peace. Because the peace of Jesus not only calms our hearts, but also gives us the strength to heal our relationships, to draw near to others, and to build bridges instead of walls. Do you want to experience this peace in your daily life? There are simple steps you can take. Set aside time for prayer, not just asking for things, but seeking true communion with God. Read His Word, meditate on His promises, and strengthen your faith in the unconditional love He has for you. And above all, trust in Him actively. When you feel overwhelmed, remember to release your burdens and place them in His hands. You don't have to carry everything. Jesus invites you to share your concerns with Him, and in that act of surrender, you will find peace. So, do not let your heart be troubled or afraid. The peace of Jesus is invaluable, one that is available to you in every moment, in every circumstance. Take it, live it, and allow it to transform your life. Number 2, Matthew 6:34, living in the present without worrying about tomorrow. Have you noticed how often we live in fear of what will happen tomorrow? We torment ourselves thinking about the what-ifs or what will happen, as if that could give us any security. But in Matthew 6:34, Jesus gives us a simple and direct lesson. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. With these words, Jesus invites us to release the unnecessary weight of constantly thinking about the future and to focus on living in the present. Because each day has its own challenges, and by carrying the burdens of the future as well, we only add to the load. Think for a moment about how worries about the future affect our daily lives. They prevent us from enjoying the present, as if we need to jump ahead to problems that may never come. We fill ourselves with anxiety and tension over things that haven't happened yet or might never happen at all. This constant cycle of worry, what if this happens, or what if it doesn't go the way I expect, only traps us in a bubble of fear and stress. We miss out on living today's blessings, on seizing present opportunities. Jesus reminds us that we do not need to carry the weight of the entire future. We should focus on what is in front of us, on what we can do right now. The invitation Jesus gives us to live in the present is liberating. He calls us to trust that each day will bring its own challenges, and that the best thing we can do is face them one by one, without worrying about those that haven't arrived yet. If you pay attention, there are so many blessings, so many moments of happiness and peace that we miss out on when we are so focused on what's to come. How many times have we missed out on enjoying a moment with a loved one, a conversation, a laugh, simply because our minds were preoccupied with what's next? Jesus calls us not to lose focus, but to see what is right in front of us, to live it fully, without fear, without anxiety. Jesus also teaches us that by living in the present, we can trust that God will take care of our tomorrow. He gives the example of the birds and the lilies, reminding us how God ensures that they lack nothing. The birds do not worry about what they will eat tomorrow, nor do the lilies worry about how they will look. God takes care of them, and how much more will He care for us, His children? Trusting in God's provision, in His sovereignty, and in His unconditional love means letting go of anxiety about the future. He already knows our needs. He knows what we are going through and what we will need tomorrow. Our job is to trust, to surrender our worries to Him, and to allow Him to take control of our journey. When we stop worrying about the future, we free up space in our minds and hearts. We feel lighter, with more peace and calm to face the challenges of the day. By releasing that unnecessary weight from our minds, We can focus better on what truly matters, what we have right now. We become more productive, more effective, because our energy isn't divided between today and tomorrow. It's here, in the present. And that peace we find by trusting God, by living one day at a time, is reflected in our emotional and mental health. Anxiety decreases, stress reduces, and we begin to live with more serenity. Jesus offers us a way out of the daily burden of worries. Living in the present as He teaches us means taking some practical steps. Thanking God for the blessings we have today: food, shelter, the people we love. Practicing gratitude helps us focus on the good we already have and keeps us from obsessing over what is missing. Surrendering our concerns to God is key. Praying, talking to Him, trusting that He takes care of us and listens to us, and practicing mindfulness in every moment, whether we are working, sharing time with others, or simply resting, helps us live with greater freedom and enjoy the gift of the present. So today I invite you to live without the burden of tomorrow. Trust that God is already in control of everything to come, that He cares for you, and that you can rest in His love. Do not let your heart be troubled by what has not yet happened. Live today fully, enjoy every moment, and let the peace of God guide every step. Because in the end, living in the present is living in His peace, His promise, and His eternal love. Number 3, Philippians 4:7, the peace that surpasses all understanding. Sometimes life feels like a mountain of worries that only keeps growing, doesn't it? We find ourselves trapped in a whirlwind of anxiety, thinking about everything we need to fix, all the problems that seem to never go away. In those moments, God gives us a powerful invitation in Philippians 4. He says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God which surpasses all understanding will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus." With these words, God offers us a direct path to release our worries and experience a peace that goes beyond anything we could ever understand. God asks us not to let anxiety control our lives. Instead of worrying about everything, we are invited to present our petitions, our concerns, everything that weighs us down, directly to Him. Yes, anxiety is something we all experience at some point. It's part of the human experience, but it's also a sign, a red flag, that it's time to draw near to God, to cast that weight on Him, to stop trying to solve everything on our own. God gives us this command not as a difficult demand to fulfill, but as an opportunity for rest and freedom. He's telling us, "Come to me, let me help you. You don't have to do it alone." When we come to God with our worries, we do so through prayer and supplication. Here, God invites us to talk to Him openly, honestly, and without filters. We don't need to use perfect words or pretend we have everything under control. We can be vulnerable. We can express all of our fears and needs, and at the same time, we are encouraged to do so with thanksgiving. Giving thanks even before we see the answer is an expression of trust, of knowing that God hears us and that in His time and way He will respond. It's a way of letting go of control and acknowledging that He is working even when we can't see it. It's saying to God, "I trust you and I know you are in control." And when we present our worries to God with confidence and gratitude, something powerful happens. We receive His peace, a peace that surpasses all understanding. This peace doesn't depend on our problems being solved. It is not a peace that is based on the absence of difficulties, but on the presence of God Himself in our lives. It's a peace that guards our hearts and minds, protecting us from anxiety and fear, because we know that we are in the hands of someone who loves us deeply and has the power to work in all situations. This peace that God gives is supernatural. It doesn't depend on our circumstances. We may be facing difficulties, problems that seem unsolvable. And still, in the middle of it all, we have an inexplicable calm. It is the certainty that no matter what happens, God is with us and He is in control. This peace becomes a protection, a wall that surrounds our thoughts and emotions, keeping us steady and serene. Notice something interesting here, the connection between prayer, gratitude, and peace. God shows us that when we combine prayer with a grateful heart, we open the door to receive the peace He promises. Gratitude helps us remember the blessings we've already received. It leads us to see that God has been faithful in the past, and that therefore we can trust that He will be faithful in the future. This attitude of gratitude allows us to keep a proper perspective. It helps us look beyond our worries and focus on God's faithfulness rather than our limitations. So how can we live this teaching in our daily lives? It's important to set aside specific times to talk to God. Times of prayer where we can pour out our hearts, express our worries, and thank Him for what He has already done. Keeping a gratitude journal is also a great tool to help us remember daily blessings, no matter how small they seem. Meditating on God's promises in passages like Philippians 4 strengthens our faith and reminds us that He is with us, that we can trust Him in every situation. Living in God's peace is possible when we make prayer and gratitude a lifestyle. It's not something that happens overnight, but little by little, as we give our burdens to God, we discover that the peace He promises begins to fill our being, a peace that sustains us, that gives us calm in the middle of the storm. Today, I invite you to experience that peace. Give God your worries, allow Him to guard your heart and mind, and live trusting that He will always be with you, caring for you and guiding you. Number 4, Psalm 23:4. Fearless in the valley of the shadow of death. In life's darkest moments, when it feels like everything is lost, we need to remember the promise in Psalm 23. David says, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." This verse is like a lighthouse in the storm, a promise that reminds us that even though we walk through the darkest valley, we are not alone. God is there, walking by our side, guiding us, protecting us. And that changes everything. Imagine a dark valley where you can't see beyond your own steps. We all go through moments like this. Sometimes it's the loss of a loved one, an unexpected illness, or a period of uncertainty when the future seems to fall apart. We find ourselves immersed in a valley of shadows where fear and despair try to take over our hearts. It's easy to feel alone in those moments, as if no one could understand what we are going through. But here is where David's words give us deep hope. "I will fear no evil, for you are with me." This declaration is a choice. David chooses not to fear because he knows that God is there with him. It's not a denial of difficulty, it's an affirmation of faith and trust in God's power to hold us. The valley of the shadow of death represents those moments when fear and uncertainty surround us. And yet, David makes the decision to not fear. This is a tremendous act of faith because it acknowledges that, despite the circumstances, God is greater than any shadow. Deciding not to fear means recognizing that our security is not in the ease of the path, but in God's constant, protective presence. Knowing that He is by our side transforms our perspective. It changes the way we see the valley because now we know that no matter what happens, God is with us. When David says, "Your rod and your staff, they comfort me," he is referring to two important symbols. The rod represents God's protection, His ability to keep us safe from any danger. The staff symbolizes His guidance, His direction in the midst of confusion. God is not only present, He is actively caring for us and leading us like a shepherd with his sheep. He protects us from attacks and shows us the right way, even when we cannot see clearly. This comfort, this assurance that God is acting on our behalf, gives us the courage to move forward. With God by our side, fear turns into trust, not because the difficulties disappear right away, but because His presence gives us a strength that does not come from ourselves. It is in our weakness that we find His strength. God gives us hope that goes beyond the present moment. He shows us that even though the valley is dark, there is an end, a light at the end of the road. Instead of getting stuck in fear, we start walking forward with confidence, knowing that every step brings us closer to the peace and restoration that God has for us. So how can we experience this peace in the middle of the valley? First, through prayer. Talking to God, even with our complaints and fears, connects us with His comfort. There is nothing too small or too big that He cannot hear. Spending time in His Word helps us remember His promises. Verses like Psalm 23 fill us with hope and give us strength. Surrounding ourselves with other believers, a community of faith, can be a great source of encouragement. God also comforts us through the words and support of those walking in the same faith. This psalm reminds us that with God, we can walk through the dark valleys without being overcome by fear, because He, our faithful shepherd, will never leave us, never forsake us. Today, I invite you to trust in this promise, to place your life, your fears, and your worries in God's hands. He is with you even in the toughest moments. So do not fear, do not be overcome by the shadows. Trust that He is holding you, guiding you, and protecting you. And remember, even when the road is hard, with God by your side, you will never be alone. Number 5, Isaiah 41:10. Do not fear, God is with you. How many times have we felt paralyzed by fear? The fear of the unknown, the fear of the future, or the fear of challenges that seem insurmountable, and we don't know how we will overcome them. In those moments, Isaiah reminds us of something that changes our entire perspective. God says, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." This is not just a nice phrase or an inspirational saying. It is a powerful, personal promise that God makes to each of us. He tells us that we do not have to face fear alone. We are not abandoned. Fear is a natural human emotion. We all feel it at some point or another. But God doesn't tell us to ignore it or minimize it. He asks us not to let that fear control us, not to let it steal our peace or make us feel helpless. And He does this by giving us a promise: I am with you. Think about this for a moment. The same God who created the universe, who holds every part of creation in His hands, tells us that He is with us. No matter how great the challenge or how dark the path, His presence is constant, firm, unshakable. I am with you is a statement of total support, a guarantee that no matter what happens, He will never leave us. This promise is deeply personal. God doesn't say, "I'll be with someone else," or "I'll be with the righteous or the strong." He says, "I am with you." This is a God who calls us by our name, who draws near to us in our weakest moments, and assures us that He is right there with us. This is a promise that is so close and direct that it reminds us that we are not just one among many to God. We are His children, and He cares deeply for every step we take. God is not only with us, but He is also our strength. He says, "I am your God who strengthens you." Sometimes we reach the limit of our strength and we feel like we can't go any further, that the burden is too heavy. But here God tells us that when our strength runs out, He gives us His own strength. He gives us that courage, that peace, and that power we need to keep going. He becomes our source of strength when we feel weak. And that gives us hope, because we are not limited by our own abilities. We are backed by the power of an eternal God. And as if that wasn't enough, He adds, "I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." This is a picture of God holding us up, supporting us with His right hand, the hand of power, authority, and justice. He doesn't promise that we will never face difficult situations, but He does promise that when we do, He will be the one holding us up. His righteous hand guarantees that we won't fall, that we will keep moving forward with Him by our side. How can we apply this promise in our daily lives? First, let's remember and meditate on this truth. It's easy to forget God's promises when the problems seem overwhelming, but returning to this word, thinking about its meaning, helps us stay focused. We can also pray, asking Him to renew our strength, to help us feel His presence, and to give us the courage we need. And when we face a challenge, we can act with confidence, knowing that God is backing us up. With the certainty of this promise, we can live with courage. We don't have to be slaves to fear or consumed by doubt. God calls us to live with confidence in Him, facing every situation with the assurance that His power is behind us. Today, I invite you to hold on to this promise. Do not fear, do not be discouraged. God is with you. He strengthens you. He upholds you with His righteous right hand. He is faithful and will fulfill every word He has promised you. Number 6, Matthew 11:28, find rest in Jesus. Have you ever felt like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders? That deep exhaustion that is not just physical, but reaches into your soul. It's something many of us know all too well. In Matthew 11, Jesus gives us an invitation that comes at just the right time, during those moments of weariness and hopelessness. He says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." This is a promise that is so powerful and personal. It's not just a temporary relief or a simple distraction. It's true rest, rest that calms the soul. Jesus' invitation is for everyone. There are no prerequisites, no conditions. He doesn't say, "Come if you've done everything right," or "Come if you have everything under control." He says, "Come, all who are weary and burdened." That includes all of us in those moments when life's burdens feel too heavy to bear. Jesus knows that human weariness is real. He knows we face challenges, struggles, and worries that often overwhelm us. He recognizes our exhaustion, and He calls us to come to Him just as we are, without masks, without pretending. And when we come to Jesus, we don't just find temporary relief, we find rest for our souls. There are many things in this world that promise relief, that offer us an escape for a while from stress and anxiety. But in reality, these are just temporary solutions. Jesus, on the other hand, offers us rest that goes beyond the moment. It's a rest that fills the emptiness in our hearts and gives us peace that nothing and no one else can offer. It's a deep, lasting rest that the world cannot give us. But Jesus doesn't just invite us to rest, He also asks us to take His yoke. That might sound strange at first, because a yoke is a heavy burden, but Jesus' yoke is different. To carry His yoke means to enter into a relationship with Him, a relationship where He walks alongside us and helps us carry our burdens. The yoke isn't a heavy weight. It's a tool that allows us to work together with Him, sharing the load. As we walk alongside Jesus, we learn from Him. We learn to be gentle and humble, to see life from His perspective. Jesus shows us that by letting go of our pride and self-sufficiency, we find true peace and freedom. He promises that His yoke is easy and His burden is light. This means that with Him, the burdens of life become easier to bear. He doesn't promise to remove all of our problems, but He gives us the strength and peace to face them. He assures us that we are not alone and that He is there, helping us, guiding us, and supporting us. His yoke is light because it doesn't depend on our strength. It depends on His grace, His unconditional love. By trusting in Him, we are freed from the need to control everything, from the heavy weight of thinking that we must solve everything on our own. So how can we accept this invitation from Jesus in our daily lives? First, by coming to Him in prayer. You don't need complicated words. Just open your heart to him. Tell him your worries, your fears, your burdens. Jesus listens, and he is ready to help you. Second, we must surrender those burdens to him. Trust that he can carry what you cannot, that his love and power are enough to sustain you. Finally, we must learn from his teachings. Read his word, meditate on his promises, and let his example guide you. Learning from Jesus isn't just a mental activity, it's a life transformation that fills us with peace. Today, I invite you to take a moment and respond to this invitation. Come to Jesus with your burdens, with your weariness, with everything that weighs you down. He is waiting to give you the rest you need. In Jesus we find true rest, a relief that doesn't fade away, and a peace that sustains us through every step. You don't have to carry your problems alone. Jesus is there, ready to walk alongside you, ready to help you. So come to him, take his yoke, and find the rest that your soul longs for. Number 7. 2 Timothy 1:7, spirit of power, love, and self-control. How many times have we let fear stop us? Fear paralyzes us, makes us doubt ourselves, and makes us feel like we're not enough. But in Timothy, we find a powerful truth that gives us strength to face those fears. For God did not give us a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of self-control. This isn't just a nice phrase, it's a declaration of what God has placed in each of us. He has equipped us not to live in fear, but to walk in power, in love, and in self-control. God has given us a strong spirit, one that enables us to live boldly, to face challenges, and to overcome whatever tries to stop us. The first thing this verse tells us is what God has not given us. He has not given us a spirit of fear. That fear that sometimes paralyzes us, that fear that makes us doubt our abilities or our worth, does not come from God. It's important to recognize that the fear that holds us back is not part of God's plan for us. Often that fear comes from difficult circumstances, insecurities, or even external influences that make us feel inadequate. But when we understand that those thoughts don't come from God, we can begin to combat them with confidence, knowing that we don't have to be dominated by them. Instead, God has given us a spirit of power. This means that he has given us the strength and courage we need to face any challenge. This power isn't just about self-confidence. It's the strength that comes from knowing that God is with us, that he equips us and supports us in everything we are called to do. With this power, we can make bold decisions, face difficult situations without shaking, because we know that we are not alone. Along with power, God has also given us a spirit of love. Love is the opposite of fear. When we truly love, fear loses its power. The love of God fills us and allows us to see others with compassion. It helps us overcome selfishness, to stop focusing on ourselves, and to connect meaningfully with others. When we love God and others, fear dissipates. The scriptures tell us that perfect love casts out fear. When we love from the heart, we find the strength to face anything because love gives us a courage that is not for personal gain, but to serve and give to others. Lastly, God has given us a spirit of self-control. This is essential to living without fear. Self-control allows us to manage our emotions, thoughts, and reactions. Instead of being swept away by fear or insecurity, we can exercise control over our responses. We can choose thoughts that reinforce our faith and act from a place of peace rather than panic. It's a gift that enables us to live disciplined lives, to form habits that draw us closer to God, strengthen our faith, and keep us focused. So how can we live according to the Spirit that God has given us? First, let's seek God in prayer, asking him to strengthen us, to fill us with his power, love, and self-control. Second, let's practice love in action. Let's serve others, look for opportunities to give, and show the love we've received to those around us. Finally, we need to develop spiritual discipline. This means setting aside time for prayer, reading His Word, and having communion with God. These practices will help us activate and live according to the Spirit He has given us. Today, I encourage you to embrace the Spirit that God has given you. With power, love, and self-control, we can overcome any fear. You don't have to live dominated by fear, because God has equipped you for a life of courage and purpose. Remember, God has given you a strong spirit, a spirit full of love and self-discipline. With Him by your side, you can overcome any challenge. Number 8. 1 Peter 5:7, casting all our anxieties on God. How many times have we felt overwhelmed by worries, anxiety, the invisible weight that robs us of peace and fills our minds with questions? It can feel like an impossible burden to release, but in Peter we find an invitation full of hope. Cast all your anxiety on Him because He cares for you. God is telling us that we don't have to carry our worries alone. We can give them to Him and rest in His loving care. When God says, cast all your anxiety on Him, He's asking us to take deliberate action. It's a choice to consciously hand over our worries to Him. This act of casting is not passive. It requires faith and trust. It's as if God is saying, don't try to solve everything on your own. Give me those worries. Trust me. And notice that God doesn't say to give Him only some of our anxieties, but all of them. He wants us to hand over every concern, every fear. Nothing is too big or too small for Him. He is not looking for us to only give Him the burdens we think we can't handle. He wants us to give Him even the worries that seem impossible to solve. Why should we trust God with our anxieties? Because He cares for us in a way that no one else can. His care is not superficial or occasional. It's deep, constant, and personal. God is attentive to each of our needs, and His love for us is unconditional. When we understand that God truly cares for us, that He knows us deeply and still loves us, it becomes much easier to entrust our burdens to Him. But what happens when we hold on to our worries? Holding on to anxiety has a negative impact on our lives. We feel drained, we struggle to sleep, and our minds are filled with worry. Anxiety becomes a barrier that prevents us from living in peace. It hinders our ability to trust in God, and it steals the opportunity to experience the peace He wants to give us. It keeps us from seeing the blessings around us and enjoying the present because we're constantly focused on what could go wrong. However, when we choose to give our anxieties to God, we experience a freedom that changes everything. It's like letting go of a burden we've been carrying on our backs and feeling a relief that allows us to breathe deeply. In that surrender, we find peace and rest for our souls. We begin to feel a greater confidence in God because we see that He truly supports us and meets our needs. Our relationship with Him strengthens, and our faith deepens as we experience His faithfulness firsthand. So how can we practice this surrender in our daily lives? First, through sincere prayer. We don't need fancy words. Just open our hearts and tell God what worries us. Sometimes it's simply saying, God, I'm scared. I don't know how to face this, but I give it to you. It's also important to practice daily surrender. It's not a one-time act, but a habit that strengthens each day. Every time you feel worry rising, take a moment to hand it over to God. Finally, remember His promises. Spend time in His Word, meditating on verses that speak of His care. This strengthens our confidence and reminds us that He will never leave us. Today, I invite you to take that step of faith. Hand over to God all those anxieties you've been carrying. You don't have to solve everything yourself. You don't need to have all the answers. God cares for you and wants you to live free from that weight. Cast your worries on Him and let His peace fill your life. Number 9, Romans 8:38, the inseparable love of God. Have you ever felt afraid of being abandoned, of being alone, or of someone stopping loving you? This is a very human fear, something that everyone can experience at some point in life. But in Romans 8, the Apostle Paul shares an incredibly powerful truth that destroys that fear. He says, "For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord." Paul is speaking with absolute certainty here. He's not saying, "I think" or "I hope." He says, "I am convinced." This is a confidence that leaves no room for doubt. Nothing, absolutely nothing, can separate us from the love of God. That phrase, "I am convinced," is so strong and firm that it invites us to live with the same unshakable faith in God's love. This love that Paul is talking about is constant and unchanging. It doesn't depend on our circumstances, our mistakes, or our doubts. God's love is eternal and unmovable. It's not affected by what happens around us or within us. When we face challenges, when we make mistakes, or when we feel unworthy, God's love remains. It never fades. It never leaves. That's the kind of love that we have from God. The kind of love that assures us that no matter what, we are His children, and He will never stop loving us. Paul then lists things that could try to separate us from this love: death, life, angels, demons, the present, the future, powers, height, depth, nothing in all creation. There is no force, no situation, no power that can break the bond of love between us and God. This should give us great peace, knowing that no matter what happens, we are safe in God's love. Whether we're on a mountaintop or in the lowest valley, His love is with us. No matter what comes in the future, no matter the challenges or uncertainties, God's love will never be shaken. It's a love that surrounds us and holds us through everything. So how can we live according to this truth? First, let's meditate on these scriptures. Think about what it means to be loved by God with a love that never ends, that can never be separated from us. Let this truth fill your heart with peace and confidence. Second, let's live knowing that nothing can separate us from God's love. We don't need to fear abandonment or rejection because we are eternally secure in His love. Third, let's share this love with others. As we experience the inseparable love of God, we are called to reflect that same love to those around us. When we share God's love, we help others experience the peace that comes from knowing they are loved unconditionally. Today, I invite you to rest in this truth. Nothing can separate you from the love of God. No matter what you face, God's love will never let you go. This love is yours forever. It is the foundation on which you can stand confidently, knowing that God is with you through every moment. Number 10, Psalm 27. The Lord is our light and salvation. Have you ever felt surrounded by uncertainty? Those moments when it seems like life is full of shadows and you can't find a clear path. In those moments, Psalm 27 brings a powerful and confident declaration. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? This verse is like a light in the darkness. It reminds us that with God as our light and salvation, we have no reason to fear anything or anyone. When David calls God his light, he is talking about something deep. Light represents clarity, direction, and purpose in the midst of darkness. It is light that allows us to see. It guides us along the right path. God's light dispels our doubts and fears because when we trust in Him, we begin to see things from His perspective. We understand that we are not alone and that He is going before us, showing us the way, even when we cannot see clearly. But God is not just our light, He is also our salvation. This means that He not only guides us, but also rescues us and protects us. God is the one who delivers us from danger. He gives us the assurance that no matter what happens, we are safe in His hands. This salvation is not just physical. God's redemption through Christ covers our spiritual lives as well. Knowing that God is our salvation gives us deep peace because we understand that nothing can take us out of His hands. David then asks, "Whom shall I fear?" This rhetorical question invites us to reflect on the confidence we have in God. If God is our light and salvation, what do we have to fear? With God by our side, there is no enemy, no problem that can destroy us. David challenges us to see our fears from the perspective of God's presence. He calls us to remember that with God, fear loses its power. He is inviting us to change our mindset, to stop focusing on the size of our fears and instead focus on the size of our God. If that wasn't enough, David also affirms that God is the strength of his life. This means that God is not only guiding and protecting us, but He is also giving us strength. He is the source of our courage, our stability in the midst of the storm. When everything around us seems to be falling apart, it is God who keeps us firm. His strength gives us resilience, the ability to keep moving forward when others would give up. With Him, we find the stability we need to face challenges boldly, knowing that our strength does not depend on our abilities, but on His power. So how can we apply this truth in our daily lives? First, let's seek God in prayer. Talking to Him daily, drawing near to His presence, helps us remember that He is our light, our salvation, and our strength. Spending time in His Word is essential because it's there that we find His promises, His teachings, and the clarity that only His truth can give. Finally, we must act in faith. It's not enough to say we trust God. We need to live out that trust by making decisions and facing our fears based on the confidence we have in Him. When we recognize God as our light and salvation, we can live without fear. We are not alone. We are not unprotected. With God, we can face anything that comes our way. Today, I encourage you to make this promise a reality in your life. Declare with David, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear?" Trust that He is with you, that His light will guide you and His strength will uphold you. Live with the assurance that with God by your side, there is no reason to fear anyone or anything. He is the ultimate source of our confidence, and in Him we find true peace and security. Number 11, John 16:33. Take heart, I have overcome the world. Have you ever felt overwhelmed by difficulties? We all face challenges, moments that come at us and make us feel insecure, as if we cannot handle it. Jesus knew this well, and in John 16, He left us an incredibly powerful promise for those moments. He says, "I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world." With these words, Jesus is not telling us that life will always be easy or that we will never face hardships. On the contrary, He acknowledges that we will have trouble. But He also invites us to take heart, to find courage, because He has overcome the world. This is a reality we can trust in no matter what difficulties we face. Jesus' victory over sin, death, and all of the world's struggles is a victory that is shared with us. It is a victory we can cling to, knowing that no matter the situation, we are already secure in His triumph. Life is full of challenges, from health problems to losses, from personal conflicts to financial struggles. It may feel like problems come one after another, and it's easy to get discouraged. But Jesus reminds us that these challenges are not the end of the story. We are not alone in them, and they do not define us. He has overcome the world. This doesn't mean that all our problems will disappear, but it does mean that we have victory in Christ. His victory is our hope, our assurance that we are more than conquerors in Him. Jesus' peace is not one that depends on everything around us being perfect. It is a peace that comes from knowing that He has already won the ultimate victory. Even when the world seems to be falling apart, our hearts can remain calm because we know that our Savior has overcome it all. His victory gives us peace because we know that He is with us through everything and that nothing can defeat us when we are in Him. So how can we live according to this promise? First, we must maintain a close relationship with Jesus. We can't experience His peace if we are distant from Him. Let's dedicate time to prayer, worship, and reading His Word. Second, remember His victory. Memorize scripture that speaks of His triumph and recall it in times of trouble. And third, don't carry your burdens alone. Share them with others. Seek support from your community of faith. And remind yourself that God is walking alongside you every step of the way. Today I invite you to take heart. Remember that Jesus has overcome the world. No matter what you face, you are not alone. You are more than a conqueror in Him, and His peace can guard your heart no matter the circumstances. Trust that Jesus' victory is your victory, and let that truth give you peace and strength. Number 12, Proverbs 3:5. Trust in the Lord, and He will direct your paths. Have you ever felt lost, unsure of which direction to take? Those doubts, that uncertainty, are common to us all. But in Proverbs 3:5, we find an instruction that can completely change our perspective and give us the security we need. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. This verse invites us to trust in God fully. It calls us to stop depending on our own understanding and to acknowledge God in every aspect of our lives. It's a call to live with complete trust, to walk with confidence knowing that God is guiding our steps. Trusting God with all our heart means giving Him every area of our lives without holding anything back. It's a total trust, one that doesn't leave any part of us out of His control. Sometimes it's easy to trust God when everything is going well or in areas of our lives that seem less complicated. But when we face difficult decisions or situations we don't understand, that's when God asks us to trust Him even more. He tells us, don't rely on your own wisdom. Trust in me completely, and I will direct your paths.